Welcome, everyone. Today, we're going to discuss how you can test application availability when delivered via either Citrix or VMware Horizon. By ways of introduction, you have myself here today. My name is Stacy Ladwinger, and I'm with the marketing team here at Goliath, as well as Yemi Ladyju, who's our senior technical consultant. Now, before we dive in, I do want to go ahead and give some just general housekeeping. The agenda for today is I'm going to spend just a few minutes talking about some of the challenges that we see organizations face, and I'm sure as many of you do. Then we're going to actually demonstrate technology that can allow you to be alerted anytime there's issues around application availability, outages, slowness, so that you as IT pros can address those issues before your users are impacted. And then we're going to discuss within how specific organizations are using it in their own environment and the value they've received. Finally, we're going to wrap up with questions. So please submit your questions throughout, and we're happy to respond to them. And if I see them come in, we'll try to respond. If not, we'll save them to the end. And one question that does always come in is this recording going to be available? Yes, within 24 hours, you will have a recording of this webinar available for you to either watch or share with your colleagues. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. What we hear from many organizations is they often are faced with challenges that applications are either out or slow, especially when they're delivered through a virtual infrastructure like Citrix or VMware Horizon. And unfortunately, it's always end users that are reporting outages or slowness, and that makes IT very reactive to their needs. So IT is completely unaware of these issues, and then it's a fire drill to try to identify root cause and resolve. Meantime, organizations are losing millions often in productivity losses. When users are distributed across locations, this makes it even more challenging. We work with a lot of health systems where IT is in one location and each individual hospital in another. And so it makes it really hard for IT to really know what's going on and what is that end user experience at each location. Of course, this is only magnified in today's world where most users are remote and you really don't fully understand what their experience is and are they having issues with outages or slowness. As I pointed out, application outages are one of the most costly impacts to a business because as soon as an individual can't access an application they need to be productive, it not only negatively impacts their productivity, but if they're in the area of customer service, if they're customer care, in healthcare specifically working with patients, now you're explicitly impacting your revenue generating activities. And then finally, not only are you often reacting late to these issues, it's really hard to identify root cause. Is it something at the application layer? Is it something within the Citrix or VMware Horizon environment? Is it with the end user? And really identifying root cause can consume a significant amount of time while the app is down. I actually have a slide, if we go to the next one, which highlights why it's so challenging to identify root cause. Many of you probably know this because you're working in this environment every day, but I've talked to many that are even in IT and they don't realize how many technology pieces need to come together in order to deliver an end user experience successfully and render an application, making it available through Citrix or a VMware Horizon. So first, if you take the user, no user is created equal. They have different behaviors, different endpoints, different ways that they connect into the organization. So you think about your environment today, you might have a headquarters office, multiple branches, or significant number of remote users, all on different devices, all with different activities. And when they initiate that ICA session, it's unique to them. And then they're connecting in a variety of ways. Are they leveraging a corporate network? Are they at home using a Wi-Fi? Do they have a hotspot? Are they using it off their phone? All of these elements can impact that experience. Only then do you get then to the core virtualization layer where you might have, if you're a Citrix customer, NetScaler, Storefront, your delivery services, your apps and desktop that you're rendering. And if you're in healthcare, you have your EHR applications. And if you're in manufacturing, this might be your ERP applications or your project management software. Below that then, you have your entire infrastructure and backend systems supporting it, licensing server, SQL databases, profile servers, Active Directory. Below that, you have a hypervisor, host layer, and that too could be a different technology. And then some of you have even more complexity because you either have all of these elements running in the cloud, like Amazon EC2 or Azure or Google Cloud, or you have pieces of it running in the cloud and you have a hybrid, which just brings in even more complexity and more technology. So when an issue arises and someone says, I can't log into my application, you immediately need to start to traverse that path and see where is the problem. And what you really need is a purpose-built tool that can quickly identify if there is an issue, that it did occur at somewhere like Active Directory and it was a GPO or profile setting issue. It had nothing to do with the application or delivery infrastructure. But if you don't have something that can isolate it, you're going to spend significant amount of time looking at each one of these elements and identifying where the issue could be. And so what you need to overcome these challenges is really a tool that is purpose-built to not only test application availability, but do it when those applications are being delivered via Citrix or VMware Horizon, and ensuring that your entire IT delivery infrastructure is up and running and ready to do what it needs to do. And when you're evaluating solutions, you need to ensure that you can continuously test without impacting the business. So you want to run this in the evening, during the day, early morning, so you can address issues before your users even start their workday, regardless of where they're located. You want to have proactive alerting. And when I say proactive, you want a tool that has embedded intelligence and automation that can automatically identify what IT elements to monitor, what thresholds to alert on if exceeded, and do that across all potential conditions and failure points. And finally, you need a solution that is going to allow you to do this across different locations, across your remote workforce, and really not just simulate what's going on, but actually launch the Citrix session in the applications, walking through what a real user would do on a specific environment and at that location. And that's exactly what Goliath does. So here's my single slide on Goliath to give you a little bit more insights of what we do before we dive deeper into the technology. We are a software vendor that offers monitoring and troubleshooting software around the end user experience running on a virtualized infrastructure like Citrix or VMware Horizon. And we work regardless of where your users are located or your workloads, if it's on premises or in the cloud. Every one of these logos that you see have turned to us because of that embedded intelligence and automation I spoke about. We can automatically discover your entire virtualized infrastructure, identify the alerts and thresholds to set across all conditions, events, and failure points, and alert you anytime your end user's performance is negatively impacted. IT leaders from this company tell us that they use Goliath because it has the organizational impact of hiring 2 to 3 full-time Citrix or VMware troubleshooting experts. That means that the technology is doing the work, not individuals. The other big key takeaways, if you look at these logos on the slide, they represent that we can scale to some of the largest deployments of Citrix or VMware environments, but we have the ease of use and price profile that allows us to be leveraged in small to medium-sized businesses. And finally, I referenced it a few times because I know a few of you are in healthcare. We are a standard in health IT. The reason we are a standard is because we have a specific module that allows you to monitor and troubleshoot the end user experience, not only across that entire infrastructure I spoke about and end user behavior, but also for all major EHR systems, Cerner, Epic, Meditech, Allscripts. We're the only vendor that has businesses and technical relationships with these vendors in order to give you full visibility of the user experience. So with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Yemi, who's going to talk about how our application availability testing solution works, how it's deployed, and then dive into the software to give you more visibility. Yemi?
Thanks, Stacy. So before we get into the demonstration, I think it's really important for us to just understand exactly how this is deployed. So if you look on the screen, this is actually a sort of an example or what the typical deployment of this technology looks like. You have your central Goliath management and configuration console that is deployed in the company data center. It can also, of course, be deployed in the cloud. It could be deployed on premises as well. And so that's sort of the central console. This is where you're going to schedule these application launches. This is where you're going to analyze the information from, so on and so forth. And then we have our application launchers that can be deployed typically as close as possible to where those users are located. So whether that is an office location, a hospital location, a clinic, things like that. Keep in mind that, of course, when you have many users working from home and working remotely, it's also very important to test not only the sort of internal connections, whether it's your VPN type connections and things like that, but also remote connections. And of course, if everyone's working from home, then really isn't any sort of office to deploy this technology at. Then a lot of our customers then leverage tools like AWS or Azure and maybe Google Cloud to and they set our launching technology in those platforms, and there it's going to launch applications maybe from different availability zones or different regions across the United States to make sure that they're not only testing those connections internally, but they're also using it to test external connections to get that early warning system to get ahead of issues that could impact remote users. So to give you some perspective as to what's actually taking place at each one of these different locations where these applications or desktops are being launched from, I have a quick video here showing the technology actually launching a Citrix session. So from that particular location, whether it's a VM or a laptop or a workstation, the technology is able to open up a web browser to the Netscaler storefront page. It's able to accept any security statements, then log in the same way an end user would, confirm that the storefront page loads, navigate the storefront page as needed, and then as you can see here on the screen, start launching these applications and desktops as configured from the central console. So it's all UI-based configuration, which we'll touch on. This is sort of scheduled on a basis that typically fits the customer needs. So if it's for instance, in a hospital environment or a healthcare environment, these are launching 24/7. In a sort of 9 to 5 workspace environment, these will start launching in the early morning hours, maybe 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, to give you that buffer period to get ahead of these issues before they impact the users. And if there's any issue with any step of the process of what we just saw in the video, the technology is going to send out a real-time alert and then give you the ability to analyze each one of those launches from this portion here, which is within the technology, the application availability analysis tab. And this is that central management and configuration console that I mentioned, giving you that sort of visibility into each one of the launches that have taken place, as well as the ability to analyze them and understand exactly what's impacting or what's causing issues for each one of your in your environment sort of as a whole. And if we're looking at this screen, this page is broken down into 2 sections. You have the top section, which is a high-level dashboard of all of the launches taking place across the entire environment. And you can see here that the blue bars represent the launch times for those launches at any particular time. And then you can see here at the top of the screen, the trend line is actually overall availability. So out of 100% at any particular given time, what does availability look like? And of course, you can see here at the top, you can filter based on the date range. You can filter based on the locations that you're launching these applications and desktops from. And you can even filter based on the applications and desktops that are being launched. So here's where you would see your, if it's a healthcare environment, maybe it's the Epic Hyperspace or Meditech applications or Cerner applications. Of course, any other Citrix delivered applications or desktops. Now, of course, this top section is very heavily used to, take a quick report, run a quick report, and send it over to management and say, hey, this is what availability would look like from a synthetic perspective for, let's say, a month. And you can see all the times that we had some failures, all the times that we were up and running. A lot of our managed services provider customers also use this to send reports out to customers that they're hosting for to show their availability. Now, the bottom section, this is typically where our customers will go when they've gotten an alert. There's an issue, there's a failure, and you want to be able to analyze a particular launch to understand what impacted that. So here you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, the date and time of the launches. You can see what applications or desktops were being launched. You can see the locations that they were being launched from, whether those are office locations or hospital locations, or maybe testing in from the data center. And you can also see, of course, whether that launch was successful or if it failed. And if it did fail, you can actually click here on this magnifying glass icon and drill into exactly what impacted this particular failure. So in this case, you can see that it failed here at the enumeration stage, right? So meaning that a particular launch or a particular application that was supposed to be launched was not available on the storefront page. And you can flip over here and sort of get screenshot evidence, not only at that failure point, but at each stage of the process. And this is where you can then understand, okay, what error message showed up. This is where you can confirm that the application in this case wasn't enumerating. So this not only gives you that sort of ability, that buffer period to get ahead of these issues before a bunch of users start complaining about them, but you also get screenshot evidence, so you're getting out of the business of relying on individual users to report these sort of outages or downtime, you know, and also it saves you that troubleshooting step as well, where you have to then ask them to recreate, you know, what's actually showing up on the screen or something like that. And keep in mind, the screenshots are available for the successful launches as well. I just wanted to show that, and you can see here that this one actually shows up and presents the desktop as configured. So with that, I'll pass it back over to Stacy so we can talk about customer cases.
Great, thank you, Yemi. And so as Yemi pulls up the screen, the first use case that we're going to talk through in terms of how they put this into practice is one of the top airlines here in the United States. And what they were challenging with is their reservation system, it was actually Sabre, was having random outages. And they had customer service agents across the US as well as in Europe. And there was no real evidence on why it was going down, when it was going down. And anytime it went down, it was not only impacting the specialists that were making the reservations, but obviously it was having a huge negative impact on their customer base, because now agents couldn't go ahead and book the reservation, change it. And all of us have sat on hold with an airline waiting for our reservation to be confirmed, altered, or changed. And we know how frustrating that was. And so they needed a solution that was going to automatically alert IT anytime there was an outage. And they needed a system that not only was alerting IT, but that was available 24/7, because that's when their agents worked. And also it was critical for them that it was 100% cloud-based. They did not want any technology on-premise. And so if we go to the next slide, I just wanted to show how they actually deployed their architecture. And so what they did is they had their central delivery infrastructure, Citrix, was actually running in AWS, and that's where they also had their reservation system, Sabre. And what they did is they put one of our app launchers on different cloud instances. One was on the East Coast, one was in the Midwest, one was on the West Coast, and actually they had one in Europe. And so throughout the day, they were continually 24/7 running tests to make sure, launching from these AWS locations, that the Citrix infrastructure was coming up, Sabre was coming up, and anytime there was an issue, whether it be that it was not coming up or it was slow, IT would be alerted. Now they were able to address issues before end users, and more importantly, customers were impacted. Let's go on to the next example. Then, and this is just a screenshot, right? You just saw that with Yemi. So before we jump in, it was just an example there. So Universal Health Services. Now, Universal Health Services, very similar scenario, completely different use case in that they were healthcare. And so anytime their main EHR system, which is called Cerner, went down, it was negatively impacting patient care, or if it was slow. And they have locations across the US. They have, I think, over 60 or 70 different hospital locations, plus in addition to that, acute facilities. And not only just their EHR application, but they have other critical applications like Dragon Dictation and others that are all running through Citrix. And the challenge was not only were they not being able to predict when there was an issue, they also were really struggling to identify root cause. What added complexity is Cerner, their EHR application is hosted. So they had a hosted system, which is actually run on the Citrix infrastructure. They had their own VDI instance of Citrix, and they had locations across the United States. And so anytime there was an issue, let's say Cerner was down, they didn't know if it was a problem with their hosted Cerner application. Was it an issue with their VDI instance? Was it an issue because of their licensing server, storage, hypervisor, all those other elements we spoke about? Or was it even a problem with the end user behavior? And was there an element at the endpoint? And so they needed a solution that not only tested, but really isolated root cause, providing empirical evidence so they could solve the issue quickly, because they were truly working with multitudes of different vendors. So Yemi, I'm going to go to the next slide, and I'm going to allow you to talk through their deployment, because it is a little more unique given they had such a major application that was hosted running on Citrix.
Absolutely. Yeah. So this was a kind of a different type of environment, as Stacy mentioned, because they have hosted Cerner. So their primary EHR application is being hosted by Cerner in their state-of-the-art data center in Kansas City. So all of the Citrix infrastructure for the delivery of that application is hosted there. So because we have, and as Stacy mentioned this earlier in the webinar, but we have both a technical and a business relationship with Cerner. We are actually the only technology that is deployed in Cerner's remote hosted data center, and that's just there for troubleshooting and getting that visibility into sort of the connections, outside from Cerner to other the hospitals that are being that these applications are being delivered to. So, but for the application availability monitor or the application testing portion, UHS actually has their central console deployed in their data center, and then they have their different application launchers at the different hospital and clinic locations across the United States. So what happens is these application launchers are actually launching sessions hosted in Cerner RHO, and then reporting all of that data back to the Goliath console here. So from the central Goliath console, they have the ability to monitor and troubleshoot real user sessions, as well as getting that full visibility into the different launches from their different locations, all in one single console.
Thanks, Yemi. And if you go to the next slide, this is just showing what you saw, and it appears the same way. So even though they are launching with a hosted version and on-premise locations throughout the US, you're going to go ahead and see they have the same capabilities where they can confirm that the Cerner application launched. And this is a great example where you can see the name of those applications. If there was a failure, then they can go ahead and drill into that detail, and they were able to see specific evidence of where that launch failed. And keep in mind, often it's not the application's fault. Often what our customers find is that there is an issue with a GPO setting. There's an issue at the storage layer. There's an issue with the licensing server, or perhaps there's an issue on the NetScaler front, right? There's lots of areas where there's issues where the application never even had a chance to launch. But all the end user knows is they couldn't get to the application. And so we're not just testing the application, and this is a critical, important point. We're testing at entire delivery infrastructure and letting you know if any single one of those are down or not working so that you can address it before your end users are impacted. I have another slide around deployment options, but before I get there, we've had a couple of questions come in, so we're rounding out to the Q&A time. So please do go and submit any other questions that you have. One thing that's important about this solution that we just talked about is there are two options for you. One, you can deploy this on premises, and in fact, we have a service called Goliath Care that ensures that you are quickly up and running. We fully train you on how to interpret the data, use the data, set the right thresholds for your organizations, and you can be successful very quickly. In fact, we can get you up and running in less than 2 hours. We also have a managed service offering. So you heard about the airlines where everything is hosted in the cloud. So you don't have to deploy anything on premise, and it can be 100% managed for you, and we can get you up and running in that way as well. So there are two different options depending on what fits your environment best. So with that, then Yemi, I'm going to go ahead, and we had a few questions come in here. Let me see here. So the first question we have from someone is, I have 50 apps I want to test. Do I need to have 50 app launchers?
Yeah, that's a good question. So that really does depend on the environment, of course. You know, for instance, some customers would like to launch all of these applications at the same time. Others will like to launch them sort of sequentially, you know, step by step, just, you know, testing them, you know, continuously throughout the entire day. All of that is supported. So the answer to that question is you don't necessarily have to have, you know, different application launchers for a specific application. So we can support anything from launching multiple applications from the same location or multiple locations launching the same application and anything in between that. So hopefully that gives you some answers there, but the sort of, I would say the blanket answer there is we have the ability to really be flexible and adjust to whatever scenario you have in your environment.
Perfect. Next question. What overhead exists when agents are deployed?
That's a good question too. Yeah, and it's pretty simple as far as the infrastructure or the things needed in your environment. Of course, there's a Goliath central monitoring console that's typically deployed in a data center, and then very little resource requirements for the application launch machine. So it's very, very little resources just because it's just going through and launching a Citrix session. So it's very little overhead there. And as far as the Citrix environment, it's just like adding an additional user launching Citrix sessions there. So the overhead is, to be quite honest, not much at all.
Thanks, Yemi. And we have two questions from John, so I'll do the first one and then we'll go to the second one. The first are, what are 2 or 3 advantages compared to Citrix utilities?
Yeah, that's a good question too. We get this a lot, the major ones that I would want to point out is, number one, this is an enterprise tool. It is integrated with our technology, so our customers are able to use this as well as the monitoring and troubleshooting capabilities that come with Goliath. The second one is the ability to schedule this on a basis. So there's, you know, the Citrix tool is it does a really good job, but however, customers you actually have to go through and, you know, actually manually set this up to launch. But this is sort of scheduled on a basis that's going to make sure that you're, you know, that you're continuously testing, not just at a point in time. Another thing that I would point out as well is the ability to test internal, external connections, as well as your published apps and your published desktops. So whatever flavor of Citrix that you're presenting to your users, this technology is going to be able to accommodate that as well. There are a few more, and as well, but those are some of the major ones that I think that I would point out as being the key differences there.
Great. And John's second question, Yemi, is your VMware solution as robust as your Citrix one?
Absolutely. So everything that we went over as far as testing the Citrix environment is available for VMware as well, for VMware Horizon as well.
Perfect. Neha asks, are scripts required to make application testing work?
That is a good question. No, it's all UI-based configuration, and we have API integration. So regardless of what icon it is, or if the icon changes, or if something on the screen moves, this is going to support that. So There aren't any scripts involved. It's all UI-based configuration, so you're up and running very, very quickly.
And then Connor has a question. Is there any view that shows the overall health of the entire Citrix infrastructure?
Yes, there is. Let me flip over to the technology and pull that up, and then we can quickly walk through that. Here we go. So this is the automatic discovery and dependency map view for Citrix, and I think that's Connor's question, but to answer that, this is that view that is going to show all of the components in your environment. It's going to automatically discover them through embedded intelligence and Citrix integration. It's going to map them out and then add over 350 monitoring rules to the environment. And when I say monitoring rules, these are intelligent alerts that are looking for conditions, points, thresholds, and events that can actually cause an end user experience issue if they're not taken care of. These sort of alerts or monitoring rules then drive a heat map structure that's available here on the screen. So as issues take place on different components, they start to turn red or orange depending on the severity. And then you can see on the left-hand side, on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll be able to see what's actually causing that alert to trigger. What are any context-specific health checks based on the role of the server in the environment, as well as high-level resource utilization information as well. So effectively, this view is a knock view, because at any point in time, you can take a look at the delivery infrastructure and understand what is actually negatively or potentially going to negatively impact the users. This view also goes a little bit deeper. So this is more of a physical or infrastructure view. But if I drill down here into this delivery layer, what I now get is a logical breakdown of the environment, where I'm able to see my delivery controllers map back logically to my delivery groups, machine catalogs, gold images, if those are available. And as I click into a particular delivery group, I now have a built-out machine infrastructure that's going to tie user experience metrics on the right-hand side of the screen here, all the way back down to the machine catalog, to the hypervisor cluster, and individual hypervisor hosts. So not only is this a knock view, as we talked about in the delivery view or the physical view, but we can now see how this is a troubleshooting stop as well, because if there are components that are directly impacting poor negative user experience, you have the knock capabilities to drive you to that, and then you have the data here to be able to point to those as being the root cause, for troubleshooting purposes. We also have other information about the environment here, concurrent users. Either those are by delivery group, average log-on duration by delivery group as well. And something that has been very useful during these sort of work from home times where people are bringing in their laptops and things like that, the receiver or workspace app version here at the bottom right-hand side corner that allows IT to understand, okay, who needs to be upgraded and what versions of receiver or workspace app the Citrix environment needs to support. Hopefully that answers that question.
All right. The next one, Yemi, is with your tool, do you have anything that could track usage of apps or how much idle time someone has?
Yes, that is a great question. We do have that. And we have it in the form of reporting. And I can actually pull up a report here that might be able to give you that insight that you're looking for. So here, I've just pulled up our Citrix end user productivity report. And this is going to break down, as you can see here on the left-hand side of the screen, the users for a particular day, or this report was run for a particular day. You can see the IP address that they're connecting in from, the infrastructure component that they connected in via, whether those are NetGill or storefront. You can see the start time of their session, of course, when they logged off or disconnected, or maybe it is an active session. Of course, the time that it changed to that state. And then you can see their duration. And specifically for productivity, you can see the interaction time. So this is the amount of time that they are actually creating ICA traffic inside of their Citrix session. Now, this is important because this tells you when they were actually working. And this is going to take into consideration all of those different pieces that go into a Citrix ICA session. So keyboard and mouse movements, maybe video traffic, input and output, printer traffic, everything that goes into it sort of gets taken into consideration. So if a user, let's say, is just moving their mouse every 15 minutes, this report will actually show them as being inactive for 14 minutes, right? After, instead of, for instance, like if you take the Windows metric, which conversely is going to say if they have any action or activity within that 15-minute period, it's going to mark the entire 15-minute period as active. This is going to account for that. It's going to account for maybe a user playing a video and then walking and doing something else, trying to sort of adjust or trying to show some sort of productivity. It will automatically sort of analyze the user session and come up with this interaction time metric. Conversely, you can see, of course, the time that they're not being active in their session, percentage, the max inactivity time, which is going to be the maximum amount of time consecutively that they were inactive within their session, which gives you that additional insight into how this particular user is working, and they take a long break, or are they working sort of short stints and things like that. And then finally, you can see the applications that they were using, that they were published, while they were within their session. So this is our end user productivity report, and this is how a lot of our customers are able to track not only the application usage, but also productivity and getting that additional insight into how users are working, especially as they're working from home.
Great. And then we have one from Megan. Do you have a way to prove home Wi-Fi